Señor Cooler.
And thus my journey into the Mad Max films ends with Mad Max Fury Road. We're finally here. I'm very excited to see this. I now realize that I went into all of these movies, with the exception of perhaps the first one, with the totally wrong mindset. Which is the mindset I'm always in. I'm a storyteller. I like stories. When I go to a film, that's the first thing I look at. The stories in these films, with perhaps the exception of Beyond Thunderdome, have been pretty good, but that's not what makes them really great films. And Fury Road is the prime example of that. Fury Road's story is pretty good, but that's not why it's a great film. It's the visuals. And I suppose the mindset I've been put into is that it's the age of CG. Anyone can make good it's much easier to make great visuals, so it's much harder for them to impress. But Fury Road sets the bar so high for all visual effects in movies from now on, pretty much. And I need to see the film again with that in mind. By default, I just go from a story standpoint, but you really need to think about the visuals in this one. Because if you just read the Wikipedia or the general story, the plot, it's pretty simple in terms of how a story translates to visuals. We have a group it's the post-apocalypse, and so we have a group of ladies who are enslaved to a wasteland warlord. And one of his lieutenants, Imperator Ferocia, decides that that it's time for her to free the slaves, the breeding slaves. And so she takes them out, she sneaks them out into the wasteland, and Immortan Joe takes his army and goes into pursuit. Towards the end of it, they have a change of plans, and they decide to charge right back, blast through Joe's forces, and get inside go through the canyon, blast the canyon apart, trap the army there, and then go over and take over the kingdom and take everything for themselves. Also, there's a character Max popping around in all this. And so when you think of what that's like, okay, they're out in a completely open road in the middle of a desertish setting. And you think of how that translates to visuals. You think, that is a pretty done and kind of boring visual setting. It's the wasteland. You have any idea how many wasteland stuff has been done? A lot. It's one of the things I didn't like about Fallout New Vegas. Wasteland and a desert. It's just kind of a double wasteland. And there's not much to really look at outside of Vegas itself. It's just a road in the desert, and it's the post-apocalypse. And this is where Miller truly shines. Because he took that, and he created something, just a whole bunch of mind-blowing visuals. It's really something else. In a complete vacuum, pretty much. If you just take a blank slate, and he can work with it, and make things that you will never see in another film anywhere. Until they rip off this one. The colors of the desert shouldn't be this interesting. It shouldn't be this wide variety of things to see. You see middle of the day going down the dusty road. You see everything in desert tornadoes, dust storms. with lightning and stuff, and then you see it at night, and then you see it like in a muddy part of the desert at nightish. And there's so it's a marvel. It's a visual marvel. And this is further emphasized by the fact that, like all the other Max films, there hasn't really been a lot of dialogue. It's a very show don't tell kind of movie. They all are. And I should have been focusing less on... I should focus on the story, that's what I'm good at, but I should have also really taken a better look and taken into better consideration with the visuals. And so with that in mind, I want to see this again. Because I'll probably see it in the dollar theaters. And I need to see this again to reevaluate it from like a visual standpoint, not just a story. Because one thing that I kept hearing over and over again is that Fury Road has a surprising feminist story. Or they sneak in a feminist story. Or Trojan horses it in. And I'm like, are you crazy? What? What trailer did you see? There's not much story to talk about. It's all in the trailer. We are not things. I want them back. And that's obvious. That's the entire premise of the story. I don't know how you're not surprised by this. I wish I could say more about the visuals. There's a visual, like, Miller is pretty good at... Again, like I said, show don't tell, and he involves a lot of you figuring things out, and a lot of you making connections, and a lot of just, you see it, and you understand what's going on, and you understand the significance of things, or the differences between things. And characters, with their actions, they just point to something, and like you know exactly what they're doing. Miller is a show don't tell masterpiece. I know I've said this a lot, but that's really what this all boils down to. So, what kind of story is he telling with all this? Going from what I said in Beyond Thunderdome is that all the films have a progression of civilization and a progression of the character Max. For civilization, again, the first one kind of last remnants of law and order and police and all that, but it's getting out of control and they can't really contain it all. Second film is a complete disintegration of order. People are just kind of scavenging to survive, and it's survival of the fittest until this group with the oil refinery kind of gets the better of them, and they're starting to kind of make the early beginnings of a rebuilding of civilization. Third film, we have Bartertown, which is a restoration of civilization, but as a corrupt state, contrasted by the lost kids or whatever, who are trying to find a civilization, then realize that civilization is corrupt, and then they start building their own. And so with this movie, we now have essentially what is a full-blown but dictator-ruled civilization. It's more akin to, it's more like Egypt, like a post-apocalyptic Egypt, where we have one ruler, and everyone kind of serves him and worships him, and what he says goes because he has the power, he has the resources, he has the armies, and he has the devotion of his followers. But meanwhile, the overwhelming majority of all people are pretty much impoverished. As is shown, he gives them water, and they're all just kind of holding up their bowls and trying to get just a little bit of water to last them maybe a few days. And while the ruler gets everything that he wants. He has a selection of five of the 5 most beautiful women, and they're his breeding mates, or whatever. As far as how he maintains control over all these people, it's mainly through religion, and promises that by serving him in battle, above all else, and dying honorably for him, that his followers, which are I forget what they're called, war boys, something like that. All the pale white-skinned guys, if they serve him in battle well, then they will meet a glorious death and go into Valhalla. They spray some sort of drug all over their face. I think it's a drug to up their adrenaline in their final moments. And it's very ritualistic in how they do that. And so Ferocia, played by Charlize Theron, from Prometheus and Snow White and the Huntsman, and then actually good films, I assume, that I don't remember at the moment. She's the Imperator, which is one of Immortan Joe's leading war generals or whatever. And so she has part of her arm missing. I think it's not like the full arm. I think it's from here onward missing. She's still got the elbow and most of the joints, but she's missing her hand and most of her wrist. And so, but she has a mechanical robot arm that she can attach and detach at will. If she's in the middle of a tense action situation, takes it off and then frees herself or whatever. Which makes her seem really badass. one of the most fun female action performances I've ever seen. She's a tough girl. That doesn't do it. My description doesn't do that justice. She kicks ass. She kicks Tom Hardy's ass, and Tom Hardy was Bane. As for the decision to replace Mel Gibson with Tom Hardy, come on, Mel Gibson's 59 pushing 60, which is not to say that he's too old to act, but the role of Max is definitely for a younger actor, plus Mel Gibson has offset issues from what rumors have said, or actually proven things, but for a role like this, Tom Hardy is definitely a good kind of a more adequate replacement. This is a very intense, action-packed film, and you just cannot see Mel Gibson pulling off the kind of stunts that are in this film. Plus, Tom Hardy's pretty convincing as Max. As Max. I cannot pronounce the last name for the life of me. But he even nails down the Australian accent pretty good. So the whole feminist angle is really supported by the villains, mainly. It's classic caveman. It's caveman, strongest survive and strongest get what they want. I am tough, I have all the best stuff, I have the most beautiful women, and I get to do what I want. Well, Immortan Joe is getting pretty old. In his introductory scene, we don't really see his character in full, but we see that he's got a very old, kind of fat, wrinkly body. And then they put some see-through armor on him. And this armor has his badges all over it, and then they place on his really scary skeleton mask or whatever. It's fascinating because he's disguising himself to make himself look younger. And by the way, having Mel Gibson as Max would be a bad move for the film, because Mel Gibson would be disguising himself as still young enough to do these kinds of stunts. Or maybe that would be a better... I don't know, but... Anyway, by the way, Immortan Joe is played by the original actor for Toe Cutter from the first Max film. Toe Cutter was the main villain. He died under a... he died in a very violent, but under a huge semi-truck ran him over, basically. My theory, and it's probably wrong, and it's probably confirmed wrong, but my theory is that Toe Cutter lived and then went on to become Immortan Joe. And that's one of the reasons his body's deformed, is because he was in a really, really bad accident when he was young. I like that better than it just being an original guy anyway, but that's probably not how it happened. Anyway, he keeps demanding he keeps running after, he's all with the branding. He's got that infamous skull branding onto all his slaves, especially his in the film they call them breeders. And they're all carrying his babies. Like, some of his kids have already grown up to be full grown adult men. And he sees them as their property, and that's taking them away from him is theft to him. And he just goes on this furious rampage after them. And some of the girls are hesitant about leaving too. They think, like, one or two of them think that if they go back to him, they might be forgiven, but they won't be, and it won't be a good life at all. His favorite. Apparently his favorite breeder is, I don't remember what in the story she's named, but she's the same actress as, I think her name's Rosie, it's something hyphenated, but she's the same actress who replaced Megan Fox in Transformers Dark of the Moon. And that's fascinating. Those are her only two roles. A complete carbon copy of Megan Fox, just with the name change. Again, that was one of the big problems with Dark of the Moon, is that it just replaced Megan Fox with a new actress, called it a different character, when there is absolutely nothing else in the script changed. She's still acting. Her place in the story is the same as Megan Fox, as in she's just a thing. And in this film, she is a Morton Joe's thing. I'm almost dead certain that Miller was intentionally making a point with that. A point of comparison. That women are not things. And to prove that, they put the main and favorite breeder as played by an actress who's first of all a Victoria's Secret model. So I think there was another one that was too. And her only role has been just a physical replacement for Megan Fox. That's so interesting, that particular choice. Anyway, they're on the run. They have these metal chastity belts around them that can only be removed by Joe himself or a clipper. And, like, you know, the visual of just getting rid of those chains, of those braces, you know, it's setting themselves free. In the end, it's led by Ferocia, who was attempting to lead the charge of them fighting for their independence, for their survival, for their identity, and just for their freedom too. Like, again, when they're going, like, you know, they're having second thoughts, when they're terrified, they're scared, or they think if they go back that they might be reaccepted. Ferocia has to be the one who's tough and says, "No, we really have to do this. We really have to set ourselves free. It's not going to be easy, but we have to do it, and you have to toughen up to do it." And then there's Max, who has had an interesting evolution from Beyond Thunderdome. So, like I said, the first film, he's struggling to keep his sanity, and then eventually loses it. The second film, he's pretty much burned out. He's not burned out, but he's surviving. He's driven only by survival, and he's not interested or sympathetic towards anyone's cause, but he still values the time that he spends. Like, if I'm going to be doing something, I might as well be doing it right. And eventually he kind of begins to hope for hope. He begins to hope that maybe some certain people might manage to survive the wasteland and build a better civilization. In the third film, he realizes that civilization exists and that they're sort of better off for it now, but that they're corrupt, and that the kids who want to find a civilization shouldn't go find it and must go and build their own. Now in that film, he didn't fully fully sympathize with the lost kids. It's kind of a mix of sympathy and indifference. In Beyond Thunderdome, he tells them about when he knows that the lost kids are about to go to are trying to find Bartertown, or will eventually discover Bartertown. He doesn't stop them from discovering it. In fact, he leads them right to it. But he does warn them that it's not what they think, and that it's not that great, and that they might want to find a better place. In this film, he has an active participation in that role, because he knows that these women are, again, it's not because they don't have low chances of winning because they're women. They have low chances because there's like 6 of them, and there's this massive army of really scary dudes with a lot of weapons. And that he wants to help, well, first of all, just for survival at first, and then once they're able to separate and go their ways, he has a change of heart, and he goes, if they're just going to keep driving onto the desert for 160 days worth of fuel or whatever, and they're going to find nothing. And he goes, I can't let that happen. As opposed to Beyond Thunderdome, where he goes, I can let that happen, but I just need to warn them. With Fury Road, he can't let that happen, and he goes and sets them on the right course, which is, let's take the brave route, go back, take over everything. From a feminist angle, it's interesting because the feminist struggle is a struggle by females to gain empowerment and acceptance and equality and strength in society, to kind of equalize things and to start being treated as equals. And that struggle is a woman's struggle. It's not automatically a man's struggle. And this is something that I myself kind of struggle with to a certain extent. It's like Max, I kind of have a mixture of indifference and sympathy. Is that those two forces are kind of in struggle, because I'm going, you gotta fight your own battles, and I've got other battles to fight, but I wish you luck. But on the other hand, when seriously bad and messed up stuff starts to happen, you can't help but feel sympathy, and if it gets as bad as Mad Max, sometimes you gotta take action and help the side that you believe in. And I think that position, that mixture of indifference and sympathy, where you don't really feel compelled to help, but on the other hand you feel some empathy, some sympathy for the feminist cause, but you don't really feel like you should do anything about it. Every now and then, there's something that happens where you do have to step in. Where if things do get bad enough, if things actually start to get worse, as one human being to another, there are certain struggles that you need to support. And in the end, when they return to the city and Furosia and the women are being raised up on the platform as the city cheers for them and cheers for the death of Morgan Joe, Max declines the spotlight and just fades away into the crowd, while Furosia is proclaimed the hero. And Max always fades into the background of all these movies, but for here, there's an interesting point to be made, is that should there be any victory in the feminist struggle, it's going to be the feminists who are hailed as heroes. In the context of this story, Furosia is definitely more heroic than Max is. But on the other hand, if it's a feminist cause, the heroes that will be remembered will be the female participants in that struggle, and that any males who participate might not be remembered, even if they've contributed. And so that's something to keep in mind if there are any significant advancements in our societal attitude towards gender differences, gender equality. is that if feminism gets a victory, it might be easy for us to ignore the contributions of the male. While it's perfectly fitting and great to honor females who have made huge contributions, led the charge, taken action and changed the world. On the other hand, there needs to be a proportionate credits where credit's due, and I wouldn't say that Max met the same level of contribution as Ferocia. He did help, and they couldn't have done it without him. They'd be doomed if they just had Max and not Ferocia, but credit where credit's due, and proportionate amount of credit. That's equality. It's past midnight, and I'm probably rambling a little bit, and maybe if you put an exact quote of what I'm saying gets taken out of proportion, that all I'm basically saying is that this film really takes a very inspired look at both sides of the people struggling for the feminist cause. Mad Max Fury Road is a visual masterpiece. I want to see Tomorrowland just to compare why Tomorrowland bombed and why Fury Road succeeded. Because, as I said in the beginning, Fury Road is just wasteland, desert, road, make something up and make creative visuals. And it excels at that. Whereas Tomorrowland, the entire point is that we are making an entire fully realized world full of all sorts of creative things, all sorts of future advancements. It's a unique setting, unlike Fury Road. But maybe the designs in Tomorrowland, I haven't seen it yet, aren't particularly interesting. Probably in part because the story isn't that great or unique, or maybe just because it's not anything particularly special or outstanding. There's an interesting comparison to be made, especially considering Fury Road became a huge box office success and Tomorrowland kind of bombed. But Fury Road, you should definitely see it. See it for the visuals, see it for the story, but especially for the visuals.